Good morning. This is Miss Ivy Marie Pabro-Maquidato, a graduate of Master of Arts in Education, major in Teaching English Communication Arts. Allow me to share to all of you my study on the experience of English-speaking anxiety and coping strategies, a transcendental phenomenological study. One of the emotional issues that affects learning for a decade up until today is the phenomenon of anxiety. Anxiety is described as the state of mind connected with the feelings of uneasiness, frustration, self-doubt, or worry. This affective domain nourishes the feeling of incompetence, reluctance, depression, and threat. Hence, this phenomenon poses negative effects not only on students' grades but also on students' progress in their language learning. In the Philippines, although English has been integrated as the medium of instruction in the Philippine educational system, yet speaking in English is still considered to be the most anxiety-provoking activity in class. For the second language students, using the L2 in their speaking most likely induces anxiety or any undesirable feelings. Although a huge number of researchers have dealt with students' emotional vulnerability, however, English-speaking anxiety still remains to be a pressing academic issue up until today. Thus, this accentuates the critical reason to understand the phenomenon deeply by viewing it based on the participants' life world experiences. The philosophical assumptions of Hurwitz et al. In 1986 established the prime theoretical foundation of this study. Hurwitz et al. In 1986 claimed three emotional attributes to support the construct of English-speaking anxiety. First, communication apprehension. Second, fear of negative evaluation. Third, test anxiety. Furthermore, the phenomenon of English-speaking anxiety is also strengthened through Stephen Krashen's affective filter hypothesis in 1982. He justified that when the student's affective filter is low enough, it triggers the brain to work and best learn, resulting in long-term learning and meaningful experience. However, when the affective filter is high, students become more anxious and this feeling intervenes or impedes learning. This research investigation is purely qualitative. Criswell's transcendental phenomenology is the most valuable procedure in studying the participants' lived experiences in depth. The 55 students from the three sections under the Marine Biology Department in a state university in Misamis Occidental were selected to participate in an online survey to determine their level of anxiety in the English language using the adopted and modified research instrument, the Foreign Language Classroom Anxiety Scale of Hurwitz et al. In 1986. Moreover, the top 5 students with the highest level of anxiety scale in English in terms of communication apprehension, fear of negative evaluation, and test anxiety were chosen as the actual participants who took part during the semi-structured interview via Zoom meeting. To gather data from the main participants, semi-structured interview questions were used. The researcher established a thorough engagement with the participants, enabling them to provide rich and robust responses. The misconceptions about their responses were clarified through follow-up phone calls. In addition, they were given copies of the interview transcripts and were asked about their feedback concerning the transcript's accuracy and consistency. Their transcriptions were then subjected to another round of validation through an external auditor to check whether descriptions and transcriptions were well illustrated and well represented. More so, pseudonyms were given on behalf of the participants to maintain the anonymity and confidentiality of their identities. In the data analysis, The data domain were subjected to Criswell's modified version of Mostaka's Stivic-Kolizikin method through the following procedures. First, descriptions of lived experiences. This time, the participants were given the liberty to reflect and describe in full details their lived experiences about the phenomenon. Second, horizontalization or listing of significant statements. Third, clustering significant statements to form themes. Fourth, generation of textual descriptions of experience. This part, the participants described vividly the what of the phenomenon. Fifth, construction of structural descriptions. Structural descriptions are associated to the how the participants experience the phenomenon. Sixth, composite descriptions of essences. These are the meanings culminated from the textual structural descriptions of the phenomenon. Through transcendental phenomenological lens, epoche was emphasized in length, which requires the elimination of supposition from the researcher. This means that the personal claim, belief, or assumptions of the researcher about the phenomenon were invalidated, disregarded, and unrecognized in the construction of the underlying essences. The results of the study. Problem 1. What are the participants' experiences of anxiety in expressing themselves orally in English? The results of the study disclosed that whenever the participants were asked to speak or express themselves in front of others, episodes of emotional tensions were developed. Among these affective manifestations were underpinned below. 1. Nervousness. Majority of the participants revealed that they usually felt more nervous when they happened to express themselves orally in English. When asked, they claimed that due to their inadequate knowledge, as well as their limited exposure and less practice in speaking, have triggered them to feel more nervous and anxious in presenting themselves. 2. Fear of embarrassment. The participants became hesitant to speak and communicate in an English classroom because they discerned that at any time they might get embarrassed. When they happened to commit errors in grammar or their articulation was erroneous, they felt too ashamed and humiliated. 3. Worry about what others say. One way or another, the participants' emotional tension has been worsened because they were so much concerned about what others might say or think about their speaking performance. 4. Lack of self-confidence. Doubting their potentials occurred when they knew that they lacked the knowledge or the fundamentals of the second language like grammar, correct pronunciation, and familiarity with the word meaning. This drove them to become more tense, conscious, and apprehensive. 5. Feeling inferior. Oftentimes, the participants felt like they were less good or not as good as their other classmates in speaking English. This feeling of inferiority has made them even more anxious and made them look down on themselves in the end. Theme 2. Physiological effects. Aside from their emotional reactions, there were also physical or physiological effects experienced by the participants. 1. Trembling or shivering. All of the participants confirmed that they have experienced anxiety through some physiological symptoms, particularly trembling or shivering of the body and its body parts like the hands, mouth, and feet. Most commonly, in oral recitation where they have to answer directly without giving them the time to think and compose their thoughts, made the participants the most anxious. Second, difficulty to express. This means that the participants could not find words to express what they have in mind. Third, difficulty in speaking. When the participants could no longer handle their nervousness or fear, they usually juggle with their speech, and in most cases, they have difficulty in speaking during the verbal discourse. Fourth, stammering. When the participants were overwhelmed with so much fear or anxiety, they usually stammered or stuttered. These stubborn changes in their speech interfere with the flow of their utterances. They were struggling with their word or sound choice, and eventually they usually using discourse fillers like kanang and and repetition and prolongation of sounds or words inevitably. Theme 3. Mental difficulties. Mental obstacles were also exhibited by the participants in verbal activities. Commonly, they unable to recall or retrieve information and prior ideas during the interaction. Having mental block further hampered their focus and obstructed their thinking and seized their train of thoughts. Problem 2. What strategies do they usually use to cope with their English language speaking anxiety? From the participants' responses, four themes emerged, namely, Theme 1. Using helpful tools. Reading English books either for leisure or academic purposes was a strategy that the participants employed to outsource knowledge and new information from stories, subject lessons, news, articles, and many more. Moreover, they also relied on English dictionaries in printed and online forms to consult unfamiliar and difficult words encountered when reading English text. They usually took down notes and referred to the dictionary to look for the word meaning, the sentence usage, and the word pronunciation. Theme 2. Putting their thoughts into writing. Utilizing helpful tools have improved the participants' basic foundation in the target language. This has facilitated their skills to put their thoughts into writing and gave them the excitement to apply their new vocabularies in translating their thoughts into written messages, particularly through writing an essay. Theme 3. Overcoming shyness. Also, by applying helpful tools enable them to overcome their shyness in speaking. Their positive involvement in reading and in consulting the dictionary has resulted in them to practicing speaking and trying to speak the English language in their classroom interaction. Theme 4. Requests for constructive feedback. Across the data sets, constructive feedback was the participants' preference in handling errors in the target language. One way to help them was through correcting errors in appropriate or constructive manner. In addition, for them, error treatment should be done exclusively by the teacher and the concerned student only. They preferred not to allow their classmates to hear the corrections made on their mistakes. Based on the findings, it may be inferred that the participants can overcome their anxiety by the implementation of appropriate strategies. Their anxiety, as manifested by emotional tension, physiological effects, and mental difficulties while they speak English, were due to their fear of a negative evaluation. However, the exercise of their initiative by the use of helpful tools, putting their thoughts into writing, overcoming their shyness, and the request for constructive feedback enabled them to cope with their English language speaking anxiety. Their initiative and open-mindedness have lessened their anxiety and have increased their confidence in developing their skills in learning English as a second language. In consonance with the results of the study, to the future researchers, they may conduct a quasi-experimental study that will identify interventions in how to alleviate the English language speaking anxiety of most 21st century students. Researchers may further explore the effects of teachers' good attitude, corrective feedback, and preparation to the level of English speaking anxiety among the second language students in their inquiry. Here are the references. Thank you for listening.